It's UFC matchmaking time. We're going to matchmake a lot of the fighters on the UFC 312 card. Most winners, some losers if I wanted to. But yeah, we're going to break down which fights I think should be next. And let's just get right into it. Let's start right off the bat with Dricus du Plessis. I think it's pretty obvious. I know he called out Alex Pereira, but he also mentioned in the post-fight that it's going to be Khamzat Chimaev. This is an obvious pay-per-view headliner. This is one of the more anticipated fights of the year coming up. We're obviously going to have an Aspinall-Jones. If that happens, it's one of the most anticipated fights. We will also be looking at Ilya versus Islam Makhachev as one of the more anticipated fights as well, if that comes together. But the only one that we know for sure we are going to get at some point is DDP versus Khamzat. Listen, it was February 8th when this fight happened. February 9th in Australia, but I'm thinking, like, as long as Khamzat can make, like, Dricus can make the turnaround, I think. I think a lot of the times we see Dricus kind of waiting to fight is because his opponents we're kind of waiting on his opponents. I'm thinking, listen, International Fight Week would be awesome. I say you have this as the main event of International Fight Week if you don't have Jones Aspinall as the main event, and if not, then you do it the pay-per-view right after, maybe at the end of July if you do 2 in July or the beginning of August. I think a pay-per-view, either International Fight Week main event or the main event of the following pay-per-view would be perfect. If they can go earlier, if Dricus is ready to go earlier, I'm about it. It's just I don't know what Khamzat's availability is going to be. And you're going to probably going to have to do one in the U.S. I don't think Dricus is going to accept something in Saudi or Abu Dhabi. He absolutely shouldn't. And we should not be waiting till October to have this fight because it kind of holds up the rest of the middleweight division where you have Imavov kind of waiting for a title shot right now. You have Kyle Bahalya who can get another win or two to get a title shot. You have a lot of these middleweights fighting right now and things are moving around. Let's get this fight going. It's one that we all want to see. It's super highly anticipated and it helps kind of set up what the rest of the division is going to be. So I think Dricus versus Khamzat's obviously the fight to make. International Fight Week headliner would be great unless Jones Aspinall happens before then or it's happening on that card. I just don't even know if we're getting Jones Aspinall. That's the whole problem with kind of matchmaking this. And yeah, we kind of just wait to see what figures out there. But honestly, like, this could not be a co-main event. You cannot have that be a co-main event. You'll probably have Imavov as the backup, honestly, for this fight, just because you never know with Khamzat. But I'm thinking, like, the pay-per-view, there's going to be 314 in April. We're getting 315 in May, and that's probably going to be Shavkat versus Bilal. 316 is probably going to be in June, and then we might have a second one in June as well, kind of like we did last year. We did 2 in June. So it'd be 317 again in June. 318 is International Fight Week. I think 317 or 318 would be awesome. If it's 370, if it's at the end of June here, gives Dricus almost 5 months. Gives Khamzat has plenty of time. It's just dependent on where it's going to be. I think somewhere in the U.S. would be great. Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, main event of International Fight Week or the pay-per-view before or directly after. But we're going to move on. We all know that's the fight to make. Sean Strickland. Seeing a lot of people say Israel Adesanya too. I think that fight can happen. I just don't think it's the right one to happen yet because we have contenders. Middleweight's kind of sorting itself out right now. I think Sean's going to need to defend his ranking spot against someone looking to get a top 5 fight, and the guy that I'm thinking deserves a top 5 fight is Caio Borralho. I think Strickland versus Izzy 2 makes a ton of sense. If Strickland loses to Bahalyo here, but like, if Strickland beats Bahalyo, it's like, okay, he's still in the top 5, and then what fight do you do next? We'll deal with that when we get there, but I think Caio Bahalyo's looking for a fight in the top 5. He beat Jared Cannonier, and like, sadly it was Paul Craig before that, but he beat Cannonier when Cannonier was like number 6. He's a very, very good fighter in this division. If he beats Sean Strickland, it kind of lines him up for a title shot, and he's a guy whose name should be starting to get circulated into those like elimination, number 1 contender elimination conversations. I think Strickland versus Bahalyo makes a ton of sense. Strickland's got to fight down and defend his top 5 spot. And Bahalyo's going to want to fight up in the top 5. It makes the most sense to me. I know you have the Hernandez and Allen fight coming up in a week or two. You have Gregory Rodriguez versus Jared Cannonier, but let's be real. Gregory Rodriguez beats Cannonier. He's probably not jumping right into this fight, given where Cannonier's ranked right now. And if Cannonier wins, He's probably not jumping back up into the top 5 considering he lost to Bahalio and Imavov back-to-back before that. So it's like, I think Strickland versus Caio Bahalio makes the most sense. He's a guy that's got hype behind him in the fighting nerds. He's willing to fight anyone. He deserves a jump into the top 5, and Strickland's really got to defend his top 5 spot. So I'm going Sean Strickland versus Caio Bahalio. This makes a lot of sense for me for UFC 318 International Fight Week. No, this should honestly be a fight night main event. If you do a fight night main event in front of a crowd, I think it makes a ton of sense. Strickland versus Bahalio. If you can do this in... Strickland just broke his nose in June, so he's probably going to wait. August, fight night main event. I hate that means Bahalio's been out for a total of a year, but like maybe a July one, maybe a fight night directly after International Fight Week, or match it up, honestly. Do Strickland versus Bahalio sometime right before or right after Duplessis versus Chimaev, because it's just going to build hype around it. So I say Duplessis versus Chimaev one week, and then the following week it's Strickland versus Bahalio. I'd love to see this happen before August. I just think that Strickland's nose is busted up. He's not going to be ready to get back in there in 3-4 months. I think it's going to take about 6 months. Where in February, it's going to bring us to August. It's just the tough thing is now that keeps Bahalio out for a year. So if we get Bahalio versus Imavov, that's great, and then you probably are going to end up having a Strickland versus Adesanya too, but that doesn't help anyone else in the division, and I think this one makes more sense. So Strickland versus Caio Bahalio. If you can do this as early as possible, do it. If you can do it in June, do it as the fight night main event in June. I just don't see that happening. Probably going to be a July timeframe, probably going to be an August timeframe, something around that. I think that makes a ton of sense in the world for a fight night main event. Moving on, Zhang Weili, another dominant win. She's beating up everyone in the division and beating them handily. I think it only makes sense for her to go up and fight. We're going to have Valentina versus Manon Fiorot in UFC 315 in May in Canada. I would expect that Valentina is going to win that. Even if it's close, they'll give it to Valentina because I think they want this fight to make. I think both these women at this point are just trying to like build legacy for their fight. And I think being two of the best in the entire world, it makes a sense for them to fight each other. Zhang Weili is ready to go up to fight at flyweight. I think with this fight having Manon Fiorot and Valentina Shevchenko in May, it kind of sets this up to be the co-main event or feature fight of the MSG card that we're going to probably have in November again. So if we do this at the MSG card in November, it gives Zhang Weili a proper amount of time to bulk up and like gain the weight so she can go up naturally to 125. And it gives Valentina another 6-7 months, probably 6 months till it gets to that November fight card. So I think Zhang Weili, Valentina Shevchenko is the only fight really that makes sense to make. I think this makes sense as a feature fight for the Madison Square Garden card in November, so let's make that one happen. Tatiana Suarez got dominated by Zhang Weili. Casual check, love saying that to people at this point because I would have felt really bad if I was telling everyone fucking no shot Tatiana won and then she won and I'm like, damn, I'm the fucking dumbass, but I'm not, so I get to rub it in a little bit. There's a matchup happening on UFC 314 in Miami. I hope to Christ it's not on the main card, but we'll probably have it as the feature fight because the UFC be woke nowadays. Except Trump's back, baby, so maybe not. Tatiana Suarez versus the winner of Jian Xiaonan versus Verna Jandiroba. Think that makes sense. Tatiana's never she's never down to fight super quick. I know that's pretty not fair to say to her for those 4 years off, but I'm talking about 2023 on, honestly. Sure, she had 2 fights in 2023 and then took all of 2024 off and just got a title shot off of beating Jessica Andrade. Yeah, I think it makes sense for her to fight the winner of Jian Xiaonan versus Verna Jandiroba. They will be the number one contenders. You can do Suarez versus the winner or the loser of that. To kind of set up what's going to be next for Zhang Weili. I don't think Tatiana deserves another shot at Zhang Weili anytime soon, but she hasn't fought either of these two women yet. She was supposed to fight Verna Jandiroba, but that fight ended up falling through. Shocker. And Jian Xiaonan had the best performance against Zhang Weili out of most people. Now, if Verna Jandiroba beats Jian Xiaonan, I actually think she deserves the title shot. But then that kind of sets it up where you can fight, you can have Jian Xiaonan versus Tatiana Suarez in the meantime, and Verna just waits for her title shot. Crazy to say Verna gets a title shot. Now, if Jian Xiaonan beats Verna Jandiroba, she already beat Tabitha Ricci. She did already fight Zhang Weili for the title, so I don't mind having a Verna Jandiroba, Tatiana Suarez while Jian Xiaonan waits for another shot. She's been active. She can take a little bit of time to get ready for her title shot. And it makes all the sense to me. So Tatiana versus what I would imagine to be the winner of this fight Like, if Yan Xiaonan loses, it should be Tatiana versus Yan Xiaonan. It's honestly going to be the loser of this fight, actually. That's the right way to put it, is Tatiana Suarez versus the loser of Zhang Weili versus Verna Jandrodova, and the winner just kind of waits for their title shot. Or, if they don't want to wait, because we're going to be waiting for a long time for Zhang Weili to fight Valentina Shevchenko, maybe it is the winner. I don't know. You're going to have to see what happens with Zhang Weili and Valentina here, but Tatiana should be fighting someone in this matchup. And then I'm thinking maybe if it's Tatiana versus Yan Xiaonan, and then Verna Jandrodova versus like a Mackenzie Dern, that might make sense, because I don't remember Verna and Mackenzie Dern fighting at all recently. I know Yan Xiaonan and Dern has fought recently, so maybe that makes some sense. But we're going to move on to Talison Teixeira. I think this fight should happen probably sometime in September is reasonable. Tatiana's going to take a fuck ton of time off. We know that. If not, it'd be great. If this ends in a quick finish, maybe one of them want to turn around quickly. But Talison Teixeira got a big win over Justin Tafa. Let's not rush him immediately, because I'd like to see him kind of build up. He's 25 years old. We do not need to rush him immediately into a big fight in the rankings and then have him get squashed by like a Tybura. Lucas Bursky. Lucas Bursky's another very big guy for the division. Like, he's tall, got a long reach. And he's a dude that, like, he'll bring the fight. He's like a good test for Talison Teixeira in terms of the fact that he does have some durability and he has some skill and technique, but he's not this world beater that's going to destroy Talison Teixeira right away. We're going to know if Teixeira is a fraud if Lucas Bursky beats him, but if he beats Lucas Bursky, then he's going, all right, dude, he beat kind of one of these craftier, tricky heavyweights. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It gets him a good like chance to get a win, and then he starts looking up at the Kennedy Nzechukwu, Dontel Mays, those kinds of fights. But I think Talison Teixeira versus Lucas Bursky makes a lot of sense. Teixeira's probably ready to turn around and fight quick. Lucas Bursky got knocked out very quickly in December, so now we're looking at over 2 months' time rest, because it was all of December, all of January, right? So it was December to January, January to February. We got a full 2 months that he's had off. Now you have Teixeira coming off a quick win. I'm thinking that if you can have Teixeira stay a little bit more active, turn around, fight in 4 months or so, 3 months, something like that. Lucas Bursky, Talison Teixeira, put this as put it on the prelims of like one of the pay-per-views coming up. You can do this on, I don't think he'll turn around quick enough for the Miami one, but if you can do this in like, if they go to Brazil, honestly, if they go to Brazil in May, which is a lot of times what they've done, it's most recently they did it at UFC 301, and they also did that with the Almeida Lewis card, which actually I think happened in November, but it was a fight night. Whenever they go to Brazil, bring Talison Teixeira, put him on the prelims. If it's a pay-per-view, put him on the prelims. If it's a fight night, they're probably going to put him on the main card, because Brazil never really gets good cards anymore. But I'd prefer to see Talison Teixeira main event the prelim. Headline the prelims against like a Lucas Bursky, or maybe co-main event the prelims against Lucas Bursky on a fight night card. I think that'd be great. Sometime in May, gives them like 3 months to continue to train, get better, and then it gives Lucas Bursky plenty of time as well. So I think Talison Teixeira, Lucas Bursky makes sense. Brazil in May, if that's what they end up doing. Moving on. Rodolfo Bellato. Now, I didn't put Jimmy Crute up here because Jimmy Crute hasn't won a fight in his last like 5 fights. I don't know what the UFC is going to do with him. I personally don't even know what to do with him. You could rematch him with Bellato again, but it's like, dude, is Jimmy Crute just going to keep rematching people that he gets draws with and then losing? So I don't know what's going to happen with Jimmy Crute, but I'm going to matchmake Rodolfo Bellato because I think he is an entertaining fighter, and I think he's a guy that's he's putting it together. He's getting some fans. Modestas Bukauskas, he's got a fight coming up, I want to say he's got a fight coming up on the fight night in London. I think Bellato versus Bukauskas makes sense. They haven't fought each other, obviously, yet. It's a pretty interesting stylistic matchup. Both guys are probably going to spend most of their time striking. And I think it's pretty intriguing. So if you can do this fight, again, if they go to Brazil, do it in Brazil. But I don't think that with the London card and being at the end of March, they're going to be able to turn around for a May. Maybe sometime in June, July would be a good time for a fight. Prelims of a fight night makes sense to me. Rodolfo Bellato, Modestas Bukauskas. We're going to go Jake Matthews next. Randy Brown. Now, I know he called out Neil Magny. They're not going to give him Neil Magny, bro. They're not. I think, honestly, a more respectable name, too, at this point in his career is a Randy Brown fight, because Jake Matthews, what is he going to fight Neil Magny and go take him to a decision after Neil Magny just got knocked out by Pratas and Michael Morales in the first round back to back? That just doesn't help really his name as much. I think if he goes out there and he gets a win over like a Randy Brown, that's really good for him. That's okay, you know what, dude? He just beat a really tough contender in Randy Brown. He's going to go up in the rankings here, or he's going to go up to now maybe fight in the rankings. If he does it more impressively than Brian Battle did, because Brian Battle barely beat Randy Brown, that's one of those names where he'll go, all right, dude, maybe Jake Matthews deserves something like this instead of a Brian Battle. So it kind of gets his name more in contention. It's a more respectable name. And on the counter side, we don't know that he's going to be able to walk through Randy Brown. It's not likely that he will. I would imagine Randy Brown would probably be the favorite for this fight. But Jake Matthews is continuing to get better. He's now stringing these good performances together. I'd be interested to see how he does against a Randy Brown matchup. So I think Randy Brown, Jake Matthews makes a lot of sense for a UFC pay-per-view in June, beginning of June. I think that'd be a really, really good one. It gives Jake Matthews about 4 months off. Randy Brown's had about 6 months since the UFC 310 pay-per-view. You can put this on as the prelim headliner of the UFC pay-per-view at the beginning of June. Jake Matthews, Randy Brown makes a ton of sense. I think it's a great fight. And we're going to move on. That's a great, dude, that's honestly, if you look at that as the prelim headliner, you'll be like, all right, dude, this is actually a scrap. This is a really good fight. Randy Brown versus Jake Matthews it's a good one. Now we're going to move on. Gabriel Santos, big win over Jack Jenkins. I think Muhammad Naimov makes sense. Now, they're on similar schedules. They're at similar positions in the featherweight rankings. Gabriel Santos is coming off a couple wins in a row now against Yiza and Muhammad Naimov. Dude, this is, it's a good fight. It's a really good fight. Muhammad Naimov is now coming off a win against Khan Offley. But he's at a pretty decent spot in the rankings because he already has wins over like Nathaniel Wood. He lost to Felipe Lima, but I think Felipe Lima is great. We get to kind of see where his jiu-jitsu's at because we know Gabriel Santos' jiu-jitsu is very good. Has Muhammad Naimov worked on it? And Gabriel Santos, how are you going to do against one of these higher-ranked guys again? Now, we know you lost to Onama, and he went to a split with Lerone Murphy. I think it's a good fight. I think it makes all the sense in the world, and these guys are on similar schedules. A finish in round 3 for Gabriel Santos, and then a decision for Muhammad Naimov back-to-back weeks. I think they match up good. I think it's a good fight. When they go back to Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, this makes sense for them to do in the Middle East or Brazil. Either one of these guys' hometowns, if they do this fight, it makes a ton of sense. Prelims of a fight night or pay-per-view, I think I'm totally cool with it. So, honestly, you can have this be the main card opener of a fight night anywhere. I think it's a really, really good fight that hardcores are going to go, dude, this is a fucking scrap. And then you can put it on the prelims of a pay-per-view also, and people will enjoy it. You're going to have a good pay-per-view when you have this on the prelim. So, Gabriel Santos, Muhammad Naimov, somewhere in the Middle East or Brazil, May, June, something around that. Now we're going to move on. Tom Nolan, impressive win over Slava Claus. I'm going to match him up with someone on this card, and it's Rongju. Rongju and Tom Nolan both had very impressive victories in pretty good fights. Rongju's fight was a scrap, but now he gets a big win over a touted prospect in Cody Steele in a very fun fight. I'm sure the UFC is willing to help put him into a more entertaining fight that's going to help his style a little bit more. And same with Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan had a great fight with Vyacheslav Barshov. One, showed us tremendous improvements. They fought on the same card. They took the same amount of damage. I think this fight makes a ton of sense to do as the prelims of a pay-per-view in June. The prelims of a fight night in June. Let's have these guys turn around, stay active. They're both very young. They both tend to be active fighters. Let's see them fight again. So Tom Nolan, Rongju, I think makes a ton of sense for the prelims of a fight night in June. Middle of June, maybe gives them each 4 months. We're going to move on. Wang Kong looked very impressive. Listen, I don't want to keep slow rolling her here. She's like 32 years old. We want to see her fight. We know how talented she is. I think it makes sense to have her start to jump into those rankings, or very close. Let's do the Veronica Hardy fight. Veronica Hardy's just outside the top 15 at flyweight. She's got that kind of style that is more likely to strike with Wang Kong, but she's also very technical, where we can see how Wang Kong does against someone with really, really good technique. With Bruna Brazil is kind of just like, she's all right, but she's not super technical. Like, Veronica Hardy's like the Corey Sandhagen at home for women's flyweights. You know what I mean? Where it's like, she's always going to be worried about the outside foot battle. She's always going to be worried about specific techniques. throwing the jab before she throws the two, and then she's going to go, you know what, I'm going to throw the two and then follow with a left hook instead of going jab first. Like, she's going to be kind of mixing it up. She's going to shoot takedowns, test that against Wang Kong, see how she holds up there. I know that Veronica Hardy is a smaller flyweight, but I think she's very, very technical, and I'd like to see how Wang Kong does against someone that has a lot of really good technique in an MMA style. And then if she wins this fight, it's like, boom, jump into the rankings. You can fight one of the top, like the number 13 or 12 ranked flyweight at the time. Then you go from there. If you win that fight, then you get to jump into the 7 area. You get to fight the number 7. And then if you win that, then you're really getting into a title elimination bout. So I think that's how you're going to set up Wang Kong here. We want to see her start to fly up in the rankings because she's very technical. She's very good. She's very entertaining. So I think Wang Kong, Veronica Hardy is a good fight to make. Wang Kong's one of these kickboxers that are super active. She's fighting very frequently, and I like to see that. She's already had 3 UFC fights, and she's been in for less than a year. So, Wang Kong, Veronica Hardy, let's see this fight happen again, May, June. I'm down for it. Moving on. Alessandre Topuria. A lot of you have been wanting to see this one. Actually, let's just go to Anshul Jubilee first. Let's get this one out of the way. Natan Levy, I'm trying to think of one of the more shitty lightweights here. Anshul Jubilee, Natan Levy, like, you got to get Anshul Jubilee a win. I mean, I was going to give him Khabib, but I don't think Khabib's going to come back for that. He wouldn't want to come back and fight one of the best guys in the division right away. One of the real double threat of the division, Anshul Jubilee. He's got to redeem himself, We're going to go back to Alexandre Topuria. What do you do with Topuria here? Because he got a good win against Colby Thickness, and Colby Thickness is no scrub. He's all right. No, Topuria did go to a decision, but he did show us that he had the cardio to go to a decision. He showed us that he is a good grappler, and again, it's smudgy a little bit. It was boring at times, but he is a good grappler. He is a dominant grappler. He's physically strong, and in the first round, we saw he does have that march forward pressure. He's got some pop. I don't want to give him like a Ronnie Barcelos matchup yet, because if Ronnie Barcelos fraud checks him, then we're like, dude, fuck, not again. You can't give him Peyton Talbot, because if he beats Peyton Talbot, it's like, all right, Talbot's coming off 2 losses. He's not really that good, and you kind of want to build Peyton Talbot up again, give him an easier fight. I don't think he's ready for the Cody Garbrandt fight, even though I would love to see it, but let's not rush him. He's 29 years old. I'd like to see him stay active, but let's get him another really good win to help build hype. And I think a Brad Katona matchup makes a lot of sense. Topuria took little to no damage against Colby Thickness. And I think if you do this fight on the as the prelim, on the prelims of the Canada card in May, it's a good timeline. It gives him 3.5 months or so, 3 months and a week to kind of get back into the training camp and fight against a guy that's pretty well rounded. Katona can grapple. He also does have high output, high cardio. And he is a little hittable, so you might have a highlight knockout reel from Alexandre Topuria. But you'll also give him a little bit of a test to kind of see where he's at in terms of his well-roundedness with one of these guys that can actually grapple as well. I think Alexandre Topuria versus Brad Katona makes a lot of sense. And if he wins this, that's where you give him the Garbrandt matchup or the Adrian Yanez matchup to kind of set him up to get ready to jump into the rankings. So this is the Fight Night matchmaking video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Let me know if you think there are any better matchups that we can make. Thank you again for watching.